Hey there, Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here. Kind of want to move this a little tiny bit so we don't have so much light from my back window shining in. Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here, but you can call me Pajama Grandma. Not in my pajamas today. I wanted to hop on and talk just for a couple of minutes about the Women's Summit starting tomorrow with our soft launch, and why a Women's Summit. Why the heck would we want to have, and why would I want to have a Women's Summit? And I want to talk a little bit about how the whole thing came about, because it came about in a really interesting way that I had never anticipated or expected. If you would have asked me a couple months ago, would I be doing a Women's Summit? Would I be interviewing some of the most incredible women on the planet, women business owners? I would say probably not. It wasn't really even in my wheelhouse as far as something that I was planning on doing. It started as a little, I wanted to do something to get engagement on my own personal Facebook group page. I've got a little Facebook group for people, helping them to supersize and grow their business as I've left corporate America. And I actually went into my closet. I'm moving, so I went into my closet and I looked for a suit, because I don't think I've had a suit on in, even for a funeral. I've been wearing dresses to funerals, so it's probably been 14 or 15 years since I actually wore a business suit. Now, that might not be true. I've got a kind of a greenish brown one. I think I've worn to a couple luncheons, but for the most part, and it's a pantsuit, which never would have been able to get away with a pantsuit in corporate America. I spent 25 years working for some of the biggest corporations on the planet, and it was, I mean, blue suit. I don't even think I probably could have worn this shirt. It would have been a white shirt, back, that's how old I am, white shirt, red tie, maybe if I had a tie or a scarf. My hair would have been up for sure. And actually, even after I left corporate America, my hair was up in a hairnet for the last 15 years. And prior to that, it was a hairnet and a helmet for about a decade and a half, and on and off for another part of a decade, because that was the culture. That's what was expected. And you followed the guidelines and the rules of someone else's business. And that's the way the world works. If you work for someone else, you follow their rules and their guidelines. If you live in your parents' house, you follow their rules and guidelines, right? For the most part. Same with corporate America. If you're working for another organization or for a company, it doesn't have to be corporate America. It could be mom and pop shop down the street. You might work for them. They still have their own way of doing things. They set things up and they have their own rules and practices and processes and procedures, even if they're not documented and written down, which is totally my thing. You still know and learn by maybe making mistakes what is and isn't expected of you. And I spent the better part of my career working in male-dominated industries. Now, you might say, well, most industries are male-dominated, and that is absolutely true. And I spent pretty much from high school on in those type of arenas and industries. I was in journalism, which was very male-dominated. I was in, and probably the least of all the industries I've been in, I was in an engineering school. So I went to engineering college to get an engineering degree. And I think there were 4 of us in most of my classes. One class, I was the only woman, or the only girl. I was a girl back then. And most of my classes were like, there were like maybe 2 of us, and everybody else was just guys. So 200 guys, 2 women. The odds were really good, right? Interesting. But so that wasn't much of a jump to go to corporate America and work in engineering and work for big corporations that were, of course, almost all men. One of my jobs, my first job out of college, after I left that, I went to another company, and I was the only woman. I mean, the only woman in the entire plant, the entire factory, except for a secretary by my same name. So there were 2 of us, 2 females in the entire organization, all men. All men. It was interesting. We had a bunch of different unions too, so it was a very interesting dynamic. But I learned a lot. I developed a tough skin, a very thick skin, and I learned how to get things done when you have to depend on your position power and your personal power, and just being a good human being. Because I think one of the greatest lessons I learned throughout all those experiences were that men and women actually, we totally think differently. And people can argue with me on that. I'm not going to look it up in the textbooks, and I'm not going to fight with scientists or doctors or people's opinions. What I learned from my personal experience is that men and women totally think differently. We approach life differently. We approach work differently. We approach raising children differently. We approach starting and running companies differently. We just have a very different approach to almost all things in life. And neither one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. And actually, if you combine the two, you get incredibly powerful results. But we're talking about why a women's summit. So part of why a women's summit is because we do think so entirely differently. We have a totally different approach to problem solving, to nurturing, to building relationships, to building companies, to building families, to maintaining order, to building community, to communicating. Everything across the board, I think that women look at differently. Men are very linear thinkers. And I really experienced this in my own home life, raising children. I have a son and I have a daughter. And I realized I could ask my son to do only one thing at a time. If I asked him to do one thing, he would go do it and get it done. If I asked him to do 2 or 3 things like I did his sister, he wouldn't do any of them because he would forget on the way to the first thing what he was going to do. Because men think in straight line, A to B, B to C, C to D, D to F. They're very goal-oriented, very results-oriented, very straight line thinkers. This is the way to do it, the only way to do it. This is the path. This is how you solve this problem. Go do it. And women, at least I believe that we look at things from a much broader perspective and more interrelated and more interconnected and more from a bigger picture standpoint where we're looking at, okay, I see this straight line to do that, but what if we deviated and did this? It would give us a much better result. It might take a day or 2 longer, but the result would be much better. What if we built this relationship? What if we partnered with so-and-so? What if? And I think that we consider more the overall impact of our decisions and what we do and what that impact is in more than just the bottom line money results and profitability, the impact on the environment, the impact on the economy, the impact on the emotional well-being of the people that work in the organization, the impact on our customers. All around, I think that we take into consideration the human element much more than most of our male counterparts. Again, anybody is welcome to argue with me. This is my opinion that I'm saying and sharing, so you may or may not agree. I'm just explaining why I wanted to do a women's summit. So I'm pretty old now. I go by the pajama grandma. For all my working decades, I started my first business when I was 13, and then I spent a quarter century in corporate America. And I've spent the last 17 years working on my own, primarily in brick and mortar businesses, Italian food manufacturing, fireworks, service industries, real estate, you name it, like 27 different things. I added it up the other day and I'm like, well, how many different industries and businesses have I actually worked in? Because somebody kept saying, oh, I've been in 17 different businesses, and it was about number 12 when I finally got some success. This was a guy. And I thought, God, I've been in a lot of different industries, a lot of different businesses. I wonder how many there've actually been. And I added them up and there was like 27 or 28. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot. But I learned a lot of things all along the way. So about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, I had gotten divorced. And as part of my divorce settlement, we needed to sell off all of our assets. And so I'm sitting in one that we're working on, which is why I'm moving. But one of the first ones to go was a commercial property that actually housed my Italian food manufacturing business. And so took a hiatus from that, which I'd been wanting to do for about 7 years. So that's a long story that has nothing to do with the Women's Summit, but mothballed the business. And I haven't regretted that decision at all, which tells me that it was the right decision. The thing is, I was too young to not do anything, but too old to really think about going back to corporate America and getting a job. Not that I think they would want me anyway. I think once you've been out on your own for a certain amount of time, it's very, very challenging. It's as challenging to go back, if not more so, than to come out of corporate America or out of the workforce in the first place. Totally different mindset between the way an employee thinks and the way an employer or business owner thinks. Light years apart. Almost opposites in a lot of ways. And so once you make that and take that leap of faith and run your own businesses, it's very, very challenging to go back and work for someone else and follow their rules, their guidelines, their way of doing things. So after decades working with mostly men and a few women along the way, I've learned some lessons and I've learned some things, and I wanted to explore some opportunities. And it really came up late last fall about doing a women's summit. I was working on just doing a small, maybe like a 5-speaker summit for my Facebook group. My Facebook group is Supersized Business for Entrepreneurs, and it was just for entrepreneurs. And I think I'm going to make it for female entrepreneurs because I want to work with more women. I'm at the point now where why can't I pick and choose who I want to work with? There are many, many women business owners that I'm sure I can help with my skills and my talents and my abilities. And so I thought, well, let's test the waters and find out if there's any interest in a women's summit. And part of the thing I was noticing is there's a lot of summits that have been going around. I've been in some and listened to a lot of them over the last probably 5 or 6 years, and noticed that they're almost all male speakers. Same in the speaker circuit. It's almost all men that are out there presenting and sharing ideas. And I'm like, but there's millions of women business owners. Why are we not learning from one another? Why are we not helping one another? Why are we not? And there's a lot of women that are, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of women that are out there helping other women to succeed and be successful. And you'll hear from some of them on this summit. And there's still many, many more out there. I mean, on a summit like this, you can only deal with, a small number of speakers. And that's why this has turned from being just one summit to at least 4 this year. We'll have at least 4 summits this year, maybe more. So you can pick and choose what is the most important topic to you. Where do you want to start? Where do you want help and information and guidance? Or you can listen to all of them because they're free. It's free to listen in and participate in the summits. So I thought I've had some really good relationships working with women over the years in corporate America and out. And I've had some really bad ones. And I've had, well, same with men, right? We've had some good relationships. We've had some bad ones. We've had some good ones. We've had some bad ones. But I noticed that they were fundamentally different. And even the bad relationships working with women left me learning more and feeling better about the situation than the bad relationships that had happened working with men. For example, I had a really, really bad business partner who was a man. And I'm sure I'm still like not quite over that because it left such a bad taste in my mouth. And I had a terrible boss. One of my first bosses in corporate America was a woman, and she just hated my guts. She had a nervous breakdown, and when I started there, some Spitfire out of college full of energy and piss and vinegar, I just rubbed her the wrong way. And so I learned a lot working from her in terms of how to get along with difficult people, how to get along with a boss who is challenging you and undermining you and holding you to a standard that even your male counterparts would never live up to. But I met her years later as I was in a different organization, and she was in the same organization but in a different role. And it was really fun to meet her again and see how she had changed and was different, and how I had changed and grown in my career, because she hadn't grown a lot in her career. I had changed massively, and what I was doing was 5 times more difficult or challenging or a larger scope than what she was doing. And I think in part it was because of her, because she challenged me and she made me be more and do more and live up to my potential more than if I'd had, just an easy boss coming right out of the gate. So I loved corporate America. I learned a lot from corporate America, but I also know how powerful it's been and how much fun it's been to have my own businesses and do my own thing and make my own rules and create my own path in life. And I want to be here to help other women to do the same. So I asked in several places about an idea of a women's summit, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Everybody's like, yeah, do a women's summit, and you can't just do it for existing business owners. You have to do it for startups as well. So wherever you happen to be in your journey of business ownership, whether you haven't made that leap of faith yet and you haven't started out even part-time on the side, or whether you have and you're just starting out and you're new, we've got some speakers that have only been in business about 6 months. We've got others that have been in business for decades like me, like we're talking 40 years. So there is a huge spectrum of experience here that you can all learn from. And I can't believe how much I've learned just interviewing the amazing women and talking to them. Now, I will forewarn you, in many of the interviews, I'm in my robe because I am the pajama grandma now. As I've transitioned from the brick and mortar world to the online world, I was joking about a conference I was going to attend a little over a year ago now. And I was joking with some big marketers, and I said, well, geez, one was a goat man and one's a unicorn guy. And I said, well, geez, I'm the pajama grandma. And they're like, well, that's kind of a good idea. So I just let it go from there. And then a couple months later, we were looking at going to this marketing conference, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be with 3,500 marketers. How do I, as an old lady, stand out? Now, when I was young and better looking, and it was a male-dominated world, it wasn't hard to stand out. It was easy to stand out. A lot of times, conferences and industry events, I was like one of maybe 3 or 4 women. And when everybody notices you then because you're one of such a small minority. But as I've gotten older and stepped out of that arena, people don't notice you as much. They notice the pretty young women, but they don't necessarily notice us old ladies. So it wasn't about being noticed. It was about being memorable and standing out and actually being who I really am. And I am all about, and there's reason behind that, which I'm sure you'll get to know over the course of the summit, that I like to work in my pajamas. It's totally 100% intentional. But that's when I became the pajama grandma. So be forewarned that in the vast majority of the interviews, a few of them I am dressed in, this one I'm dressed in, but in most of the interviews, I will be in my pajamas or a robe, because that is how I work through the vast majority of my day. When I do go meet with clients and customers, outside of the Zoom and the electronic meetings, I do get dressed. I do put on clothes like this suit, although I seldom, I don't wear suits anymore. That's my prerogative, having my own business. That's one of the cool things about having my own business. So you'll see me in my pajamas. You'll see me interviewing amazing women. You won't see me talking very much, because mostly I'm asking questions and I'm just letting them share their wisdom and their advice. And it is vast. I want to summarize, and I think I'm going to summarize each of these speakers on some kind of a format that I will share with everybody that participates in the summit, because I think it's so powerful, that the key things. And I tried to call them out when they said something amazing, but I didn't get all of it. I guarantee I missed a lot of it, but every once in a while they would say something so profound. I'm like, did you guys get that? Did you get that? That is so powerful. So look for those things throughout the summit. I'm going to be adding, if I can get some women to participate, some actual live interviews, so that I can bring some women on live and you can ask questions or comments if you want. That's kind of a hard gig, because it's hard to get women to commit to a time live. I learned that lesson doing the summit. It's hard to get people to commit to a time at all and then show up, and trying to get them to show up live and on time is really a challenge. And so that's why the vast majority of the summit is pre-recorded, so that we've got places that we can have there. We can just add some live components to make it more fun and interactive. I'm really tempted to have a Q&A question panel, and we might do that as an after party event, is have, after a couple of weeks, a Q&A session with some of your favorite speakers. Maybe I'll have everybody vote, and then whoever the speakers are that get the most votes, we'll go ahead and we'll invite them to a Q&A panel discussion, and we'll have a Q&A call where we could all hop on a call together, or on Zoom, or I don't think we can physically get together, because there's women from all over the world in the summit. So this summit, customers, you might be wondering, well, why is this summit about customers for women business owners? And it's because I asked the question, and I asked a lot of women business owners, I mean thousands, what is your biggest challenge? What is your biggest concern? What gives you the most headaches? What are you worried about the most? What is your biggest problem? And it came back 60% of the responses had something to do with customers and customer handling. Now, that's not unique to women business owners, by the way. I was hoping that wasn't the number one thing, but when it came back as that needed to be the topic of the first summit, because customers are not my thing. They're not my area of expertise. And remember, I wanted to start this and do this for my page and for my business. And mine's called Supersize Your Business. So it's about helping people grow and put in processes and systems that make their life easier. So this is not, but that's why I've learned so much from it, because it isn't my personal area of expertise. So it made it fun to ask questions of the people that it is their area of expertise. And customers, again, the number one category of questions that came up had to do with customers. How do I get new customers? How do I find customers? How do I even find people that might be interested in my thing, my coaching program, my diet product, my crypto, whatever, my whatever product or service you might be providing for people? How do you find people that would be interested in that? Because it's a lot easier to offer your product or service to someone that's already interested and predisposed than it is to cold call or beg people to do business with you. So how do you find people in the first place? Then once you find them, what do you do with them? How do you get them? How do you get their attention so that they show an interest in what you have to offer? And then how do you offer it to them? What do you offer them? What do you do for people? How do you win them as a customer? And then when you win them and you get their money and their business, what do you do? What's their experience like to ensure that they have an incredible experience and will want to continue to do business with you in the future? Because the bottom line is, with customers, we want to create customers for life. We want to create at least repeat customers, people that will come back to our business time and time again, because it's so much less work and so much less expensive to deal with an existing customer than it is to get a new one. And how do we build those relationships and create lifelong customers? So, no customers, no business. Businesses are all about customers and serving other people and giving them value in exchange for money or whatever resource you're exchanging for. So we've got to find a way to do all those things and understand how to do all those things, or get someone with areas of expertise to help us to do those things for our business. We don't have to personally do them all, but there's certain things with respect to dealing with customers that all businesses need to do in order to have long-term success and viability. So that's why the Women's Summit. Why? Because I wanted to work with more women, and I wanted to actually help other women to work with more women, because it makes my heart happy to see other women succeeding and getting what they want and creating the life they want. I know that running through my life in my 30s and 40s was miserable. And at 50, I actually had a sudden cardiac arrest and died because I was, as a woman, doing too much and trying to do everything myself. And it's my mission to make sure that no other woman does that no other woman works herself to death, because most people aren't as lucky as me. They don't get a second chance. They don't get to come back and do what it is that they want to do. And that's why I pursue with a vengeance what it is that I want to do. And I want to encourage you to do the same. So that's it. That's why the Women's Summit. We will see you soon. My pajamas. Bye.